good hello to whoever decides to watch/listen to this video. This video is for everybody who wants to learn a bit about academic writing, sort of how best to improve your academic writing. Now, immediately, I'm going to just throw up the list of points on the screen for those who are watching and not listening, but we will be discussing each of them point by point to go over them and just see, how you can improve things. Now, as one of my jobs, I teach a couple of subjects, and I have to teach how to do proper academic writing. So, this is not only for university level, this is also for high school level. If you're going to go to university, then it's always a good time to start learning this kind of thing and how to do it as well as possible. So there are a couple of things when it comes to more so academic writings. You have to be, usually there's a bit of a formula to it, there's a structure, there are specific ways in which you are supposed to be writing. Now you can vary this up. Is there a correct way to do this? No, there's no correct way to write, but there are a couple of small things, that you should keep in mind. So we're just going to jump straight into it. I'm going to leave the more specifically university stuff to the end, but all of this does relate to people who are doing university as well. It's all, but basically at the end we're going to be looking at referencing, which is more of a university thing. So, first point, you need to always use proper language, and it seems like something really obvious and a bit silly, but it's important. This is not something you can just learn from watching. You have to learn from doing. You need to use the correct grammar. You need to know when to use certain terms. You need to obviously have correct spelling, good vocabulary. These things you can only really improve by just reading more, learning more words, etc. You need to vary up your sentence types. A very, very common thing, especially in high school students, is to do just complex sentences. You're just writing complex sentences, which are not good. Do not just write complex sentences. So a complex sentence is one where it will have usually multiple parts, a bunch of commas. It will just drag on forever and ever, and it usually comes down to someone being afraid of just using a full stop, which we all have this, or not we all, but a lot of people have this feeling, like if we do a full stop, or a period, if you're American, if you do a full stop or a period, then it's sort of like, oh no, this is like a big, like gap, it's like a break, but it isn't. Use full stops. It would be better to have more simple and compound sentences than to have a huge amount of complex sentences that just trail on forever and ever and ever. You need to not do that. And also vary it up. Because obviously not just simple sentences. You shouldn't be writing an academic text in simple statements, but don't just use one type. Don't overuse complex sentences. There is a time and a place for complex sentences. And then, of course, there are things like the fact that you need to be writing in a formal language, generally. Now, at high school level, you can kind of get away with this, but at university level, generally, they do not want you to use anything like a contraction or slang. Unless, of course, you're specifically analyzing slang, but that doesn't count. The analysis would not be in slang, generally. So, no can't, shouldn't, wouldn't. You can't use those. It's cannot, would not, should not. It is, so basically any of the ones that, if you don't know what a contraction is those words that are like that, where cannot becomes can't. It'll remove some letters and have an apostrophe. Do not use those. Generally, apostrophes in academic writing are just for possessive. It's John's house, that kind of thing. So those are just small language things to keep in mind. Always do as best as you can in that sense. And the only way to really improve this is to write more and to read and to watch things with subtitles. Basically just anything that will increase your vocabulary and show you people writing things in a correct sense always. So that is just a basic thing you need to do. When you are writing, you should not, the person who's marking should not be sitting there going, okay, they think that a lot is one word. It isn't, as well. Those are two words. These are basic, common mistakes. Do not make these kind of mistakes. If you're typing on a computer, the computer will usually tell you that that is a mistake. Listen to the computer. The computer is your friend. things like that. But obviously writing by hand, especially university level and most high schools, at least in this country, you're not going to be writing it on a computer. You're going to be writing it by hand, so you need to get good at writing by hand. And also, just as a simple little extra thing here, if you're writing by hand, work on your handwriting. If you get a script, if a marker gets a script that is incomprehensible, that I cannot read, then it will get a 0. You cannot be marked on things that people can't tell what you're saying. So always be careful of those kind of things. Now, the next point is to use the correct structure. So generally, you would be looking at this intro, body, conclusion structure. So this is for like regular essays. This doesn't really apply to something like a thesis. But if you're at the thesis level, you shouldn't be watching this video, because this is a very, very basic introductory kind of text, and you shouldn't be looking at basic tips for academic writing if you're at the master's level. So, intro, body, conclusion. The introduction essentially sets up what the essay is going to be about. All right? You will often see that they will be very, very straightforward, right? There will be some aspects where it's being poetic, or it'll have a statement, so a preamble. But then there will often be a section after that that says, this essay will discuss blah, 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 blah. That is good. You need to mention the things you're going to discuss. The introduction is, I know this is wild, your introduction introduces the rest of the text. You are introducing the body paragraphs. Now, there is not one body paragraph. I remember as a kid, I don't know if I was the only person that thought this, but when you're taught as a kid, intro, body, conclusion, I thought it was intro and then one long body paragraph. Do not do that. Do not do that. It is multiple paragraphs, and the body is where obviously you'll get the bulk of the actual work. You should not have information in your introduction or in your conclusion. Your intro and conclusion are for setting up and for concluding. They are not for providing evidence and information for your argument. You do not argue in your introduction. You do not jump straight into it. You set up the essay. Blah, 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 blah. This is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to say this. And then, in your body paragraphs, you will discuss. And we will talk about some things in the body paragraph specifically, but not just yet. And then, of course, your conclusion. Your conclusion is more so a summing up of all your conclusions, because there are lots of conclusions throughout an essay. Your body paragraphs should all essentially have a little conclusion in them. So, your conclusion is just saying, listen, this is what I spoke about, this is what I said, done now. That's what a conclusion is. It's just sort of saying, this is what I did. You need to show that you have a grasp on your own statements, on what you yourself have been writing about. So that is why a conclusion is important. So let's look at the next one. Always maintain focus throughout. This is something that you have to work on a lot of the time. It is easy to go on tangents. This happened to me before. When I was in undergrad, I think it was like my first semester, I wrote an essay I was really, really proud of, and I got it back, and I got like 50% or something, because they said, your essay was fine, but you went off topic. You were talking about things that were not in the purview of the question. Which, that's like, sucks, because, if you feel like you wrote something good, but you didn't actually answer the question. If they're asking you a question, you answer that question. That is what you always do. You answer it in a straightforward sense. And furthermore, it's just a little addition here for anyone who's, especially say first year at university, and you think, oh, maybe I can copy and paste some things for assignments or something. Do not do that. It never looks good because it does not actually answer the question. It usually looks like a bunch of random gibberish where the person is talking about something that has nothing to do with anything. And that is when you then get very low marks. Very low marks. And you don't want to get very low marks. So always maintain your focus. Always bring it back to what you are talking about centrally. This can get difficult when it becomes a longer text, because often there'll be lots of points you're talking about. But don't go too far off base. Because also, especially if you're writing, say, an exam, you have limited time. So you want to get all the points in so that you can leave and get a good mark. You don't want to be sitting there for ages with all sorts of tangents and talking about things that are not pertinent to what has actually been asked. So, Next one is quite simple. Do not rush through it. Don't write an essay where they say to you, discuss blah, 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 600 words. Don't write 200 words. This might sound obvious to people who do write all of it, but there are people who try this, who will try to write less. And you will never get good marks, ever, if you rush through. You need to give every single section as much of your attention as it needs. It needs to be as much as possible. Talk about the thing until you no longer need to talk about the thing. Quite simple. This is a very, very simple one. Just don't rush. Especially with exams. It might seem like a hassle to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I have to sit here for 2 to 3 hours. You know what? It's 2 to 3 hours, and then it's done. You might as well sit there, do your 2 to 3 hours, all right? And then you can go home. Don't try and rush through it. I know some, like my university, you can leave early if you finish. I think it's before the 15 minutes at the end, and after an hour in, you can leave if you finish. But you don't want to finish in an hour and be like, done, and leave, because you're probably not going to get the marks you could have gotten. Also because, this will come up later, there are other things you can do to pass that time. You need to use all the time that you can use. Do not rush. And especially assignments. Assignments, there's even less of an excuse. Because assignments, you'll generally be given assignments way ahead of time. Now, if you're only doing it the night before, then that is kind of your fault, unless there's certain circumstances that stopped you from doing that. But a lot of the time it is, your own fault for doing that. But that still is not an excuse to rush through it. And actually, you might think to yourself, oh, I only have a day. Yeah, a day has lots of hours in it. And actually, really, writing an essay doesn't take that many hours. The research often takes a lot more time than the actual writing of it. But yes, so don't rush. Now the next one, this is just a little thing for body paragraphs. The point, quote, comment system. This is, and I also say there, but vary up the system. It's not a firm system. It is a system that changes and moves, but this is a good way to just think of it, okay? Because here's what they'll say to you. They'll give you a question, and it's asking about something. And now, if you just say, okay, cool, I'm just going to say what it is, but then you look at the mark allocation, and let's say this isn't an essay, right? This is just regular exam question. They'll be like, okay, cool, look, here we go. It's for 4 marks, and they say, discuss this term, and they give you a term, a key term. And then you're like, okay, cool, and you just say what it is. And they'll say, is that worth 4 marks? At most, that is worth 2 marks. You did not explain further. You did not give an example. You just stated what it was. That is why you get the point, quote, comment system. Now, this system is quite simple, okay? Because it's in the title. All right, point. State the point. What are you going to talk about? Quote. Give an example. All right. Now this could be a direct or indirect quote, or if it's in like a different kind of subject that isn't, literary based, then you can give an actual example of the thing that it is, right? And then comment, which is a further discussion on that point and using that quote to be like, okay, this is what it's about. So point, quote, / example, and comment. Very, very simple. If you're just giving an example, then I don't know that you actually know what you're talking about. If I'm a marker, I'll be like, well, I can't tell that you actually know what you're saying. All you're doing is give an example, which isn't a full answer. If you just give a point, then I'll say, okay, well, they can say the point, but they can't give me an example. Or if they give me a point and a comment, and then I'm like, okay, well, where's the example? Where's the further elaboration? Where's the whatever? So you need to give as much as you can. But when I say vary up the system, you do not have to always do point, quote, comment. It can be moved around. You could give multiple points, sometimes multiple quotes. It depends on what it is. But this is just a good little system for a beginner. It becomes easier when you're sort of in it and you've been doing a lot of academic writing. It gets a lot easier. But this is sort of a good little introductory point, and it's something that I tell my students kind of all the time, because it's a good way of structuring it in your brain to sort of think, okay, I need to give all of these points to be able to fully elaborate on whatever it is that they're asking me about. All right, the next point, be active but not personal. All right, do not use passive voice. All right, you need to be assertive, confident, say what it is that you want to say. Now, you cannot make wild claims. You can't sit there and say, according to me, this is fact. You can't say that. But you do say something like, this source suggests that, whatever, or this source states that. Don't say, well, first off, you get passive, then you get sort of passive. So you get like passive in the sense of being afraid, of using hedging, of not just saying something directly, and then you get passive more in the traditional sense of the term passive in terms of grammar, in which you are inverting the subject-verb-object system. So, right, the one you always hear when you're learning active and passive voice in school, John kicked the ball versus the ball was kicked by John. You know, you will say something like, this has shown, rather than the thing has shown, not me, the thing. Not like that. You need to be active with what you are saying. But do not be personal. Here's the thing about academic writings. Your opinion doesn't really matter. You are not giving an opinion. You are giving a discussion. They want to see that you are able to discuss something. This is not an opinion piece. It's not in like a magazine where they want to know what you think. They want to know that you understand. So do not say, I think. If you're saying I think, you're already wrong. I believe, you're already wrong. Do not use the word I or me or mine unless you're giving an anecdote. Because your opinion, in terms of academic writing, does not matter in terms of the grammatical sense of the word I and personal. They want your personal opinion, they want your personal take on it, but they don't want you sitting there and saying, well, I think that this, and this. Don't say it. Say, provide your evidence, and then you say, this shows that, and then you give your point. You say it confidently, but not saying, well, I believe that. Don't say that. You could add in, as I said, anecdotes. So, you could say, you discuss something, you say, I just want to bring up a personal anecdote here about whatever that is pertinent to this discussion, blah, 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 blah. You can do that. But do not say anything that sounds like, you are the authority. You need to let the evidence speak for itself. The argument is what matters, not the person writing it. You do not matter. You need to just state the things, have confidence in what you're saying, so that the work speaks for itself, not that you have to back it up and sit there and go, oh, no, I'm this, what I think. Don't do that. Just straight up say it. Say it without adding in any of those extra little details there about your own personal view on it. All right, next point. Use good paragraphing. This is body paragraph things again. A paragraph should not be too long. Now, if you read some philosophy and whatever, you'll see these people who write these disgustingly long paragraphs. They're wrong. Like all of them, even the famous ones, they're wrong. They shouldn't have done that. Now, also, that's just a joke. You can have long paragraphs if you know what you're doing. But overly long paragraphs can look overwhelming. So let's say I'm a marker and I get 5 pages, right? A 5-page essay. And 2 of those pages are 1 paragraph. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. You should not have done that. A paragraph, generally, contains a single idea that is then explored and elaborated and discussed. If there are extra points, you switch over to a new paragraph, unless you really, really have to, whatever. A paragraph should contain, essentially, a topic sentence in the beginning, which says, this paragraph is going to be about this. Right? Very simple. Then the rest of the paragraph is about that thing. It's very, very simple. You need to show what you're going to talk about, and then you talk about that thing in the paragraph. Don't just waffle on. You need to have structure to the way that you are writing and the way you are thinking. Because if you're just saying points randomly in a random order, it doesn't really, It doesn't work. It doesn't sound good. So don't do that. This also goes with paragraph linking. This is a little bit of a more advanced skill, but it's something you must learn to do because it allows your language to flow in a text. Now, if you're writing an essay and it feels like, as I said in the next one, don't list things, if it starts feeling like a list, it's just like, I'm talking about this, now I'm talking about this, now I'm talking about this, that doesn't sound good. If you could end one sentence in one way, like the end of a paragraph in one way, and then you start the next paragraph in a way that is somehow related to that. Let's just say, for example, you are talking about YouTube videos and that they're too long. So let's say you're going to be ending up off a paragraph where you were just speaking about a specific YouTuber who you think's videos are too long. You'll be like, their videos, as you can tell, are far too long for the amount of information that they provide. End of paragraph. Next paragraph. However, length of a video can play into its strength. You see, I ended off with the idea of length, and I started the next paragraph with the idea of length. I am linking them together, which flows nicely. It doesn't feel like I'm just listing things in a bullet point. Which then goes into the next one, which is do not list things. Don't do that. Don't just sort of go, now this, now this, now this. And especially, and I've seen this, it's very bad. Do not ever do this. If you're doing an essay, unless there's a very, very good reason for it, do not do bullet or numbered points unless there is a specific reason for it. I have seen essays where the entire essay was bullet points. That is not an essay anymore. That is a list. And that is a bad thing. Do not do that. That is just never good. Ever. So do not do that kind of a thing. Now, of course, there are some writers who've essentially done what you could say amounts to a list. Someone like Wittgenstein. Basically, it reads like a list in a sense. But they knew what they were doing. And if you are new to academic writing, then rather don't try and do things that are new and unique. Stick to a standard structure, and then later when you get better, you can start messing with the structure and start changing things, right? Don't start out trying to be experimental. You can only be experimental once you learn the rules. When you learn the rules, you're then able to break the rules. If you don't know the rules and you break the rules, you're just doing it wrong. So that is a thing to keep in mind. Now the next one, this is I try and drill this into my students' heads. Imagine the marker is dumb or ignorant. All right. Sometimes a student will write something and they won't really fully explain it because they understand. In their head, they get it. They're like, okay, no, I know what I'm saying. I don't care what you think you're saying. You need to say what you are saying. You need to actually write it down. Explain in full. Imagine that the person marking it doesn't know the subject. They're like, I have no idea. I don't know what this is. I don't know what sociology is. I don't know what literature is. I don't know any of these words. I need you to say it in a language in which I can understand. Now, the reason for this is because they need to see that you understand. They can't read your minds. A marker is reading hundreds of scripts a semester. Hundreds. Maybe even over 1,000, maybe even thousands. That would be a bit much. But at least hundreds of scripts. So if you're reading hundreds of scripts, then you can't expect them to see you basically as an individual. You can't expect them to sit there and go, oh yes, I think that they know what they're talking about. Yes, I'll give them. No. They want to see that you write it out in full. What are you talking about? Say it in full. Very, very simple. All right? Pretend that they're an idiot. You go, oh yeah, no, the marker doesn't know anything. He hardly knows English. Cool. Pretend that. Answer it. Now, obviously, you're not going to say it in baby words, but you need to spell it out because they need to see that you know what you are talking about. This isn't part of this list, but a standard thing that I try to teach when people ask me about how best to study, very, very simple. The best way to study is literally to teach, first of all, but if you can explain a concept in simple terms, it means you understand it. So if you can explain it simply, That means you know what you're talking about. If you have to waffle on about other nonsense, then you don't really know what you're talking about. Then you're just trying to sound verbose and clever, but you're actually betraying the fact that you don't actually know what you're saying. That's why there's a lot of criticisms you can make of, like, say, a lot of philosophy, which just waffles on for 800 pages when it could have been 30 pages. It's just waffle trying to disguise something quite simple. Don't waffle. People will call you out for being elitist and pretentious. Don't do that. Rather, just say what you mean. Explain yourself. Alright, next point. This is very, very simple, obvious. Always edit. Do not write something and then just submit it. Don't do that. You will make mistakes. We are all human. We all make mistakes. So if you make a mistake, you probably won't notice it the first time. But if you reread your work, all of a sudden, oh, whoops, I made this mistake. I need to fix this mistake. That's very, very simple, right? It's a very simple, obvious thing. Now, when you're editing, now, to me, the best way, this doesn't work in exams though, but to me, the thing that works the best is to actually read it out loud. Because you start noticing things. You'll be reading out loud and you go, that phrase sounds weird said out loud. It must be a wrong. I phrased it wrong. Let me rewrite it. Now, in exams, that's harder because you can't talk out loud in an exam venue, typically. So that doesn't really work in an exam. But for assignments, it works well. All right? When you're writing essays at home, it works great. Read it over and say it out loud. All right? Say it all out loud. It will help. Because generally, if you're speaking the language, you're able to speak the language. So if you then read something that is wrong, you'll go, oh, that doesn't sound right. I don't know why I wrote it that way, but that doesn't sound right. Always edit. You will always make small mistakes. You could have missed a comma. You could have forgotten to capitalize a letter. You could have forgotten to put in an apostrophe where you should have. You could have forgotten a word. That also happens. Sometimes you miss a word, especially when you're writing by hand. You could very easily miss a word. And there's no system there saying, listen, my man, you left out the word the. And so, imagine if you read a sentence that said, there is a house on the hill. Maybe it makes sense, right? But what happens if you forgot the the? There's a house on hill. All of a sudden, that doesn't sound right. Right? So you need to just go and fix those small little things. We all make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. Make your mistake, but then go back and fix the mistake. Very simple. Now, the next one, always remove fluff. Do not waffle. I already said this, but don't waffle. This is me being much more specific now. Don't waffle on. Don't add fluff. Don't basically try and pad out the word count. If they say 600 words, give them 600 words, not 400 words and then a bunch of adjectives and adverbs. Don't do that. Just state everything. Be very, very plain. Say what you want to say. This is academic English, especially, say, at undergraduate level. They don't want you to be doing, I'm in this flowery language and metaphorical language, and, it's so beautiful to read. They don't really care. They want to see that you know the work. All right? You're not being published. You are just writing an assignment. So, remove fluff. But I would say, in general, remove fluff. Fluff is bad. If a book is 800 pages, but it could be reduced, then it should have been reduced because all of that other stuff was pointless. You get books where people write books and you go, wow, this is too long. See, that's the idea. Say, watch a movie and you're like, God, that movie was 3 hours long. It could have been an hour and a half and it would have been better. Do that. Remove the excess nonsense. Now, lastly, we're coming to a thing which is more so university-focused, but not necessarily. Referencing. Now, first off, if you're at university, you are going to have a specific referencing style that you are told to use. I cannot give them all because there are too many of them. But it'll be things like the Harvard referencing style, or AP, is it APA referencing style? I'm used to the Harvard referencing style. Just had to cough there. So, those kind of things, very, very simple. If you don't know how to reference, Google it. Okay? Every single referencing system is a little bit different, but generally it will be, or at least in, say, Harvard, you'll either use a bracket approach or a footnote approach, where you'll get to a point in which you have said something which is not your own idea. That's the thing. It is not your own idea. And so I need to now reference that thing. Because otherwise that's called plagiarism. That is intellectual theft. At higher levels, you can get expelled for it. If, say, a university lecturer or professor were to plagiarize something, they could be kicked out of academia for the rest of their life. So, correctly reference. State where the information you got came from. Now, I have seen many, many people writing bibliographies and in-text references. Now, the in-text reference you either get for the direct or indirect quotes. Okay, a direct quote is the one that's in, I'm actually taking words out of a text. Those, obviously, you need to give a reference. You need to say, Samantha Peterson, comma, this is in like the Harvard style, comma, 1999, colon, 3 to 4, close bracket, 3 to 4 was pages 3 to 4. Now, different systems work differently, but essentially, you need to state where the information came from. Now, you'll then go all the way back to the bibliography at the end of your assignment. You need to state where you got all of your information, okay? Because where did you actually get it? Okay, and this is the full reference. Now, it depends on the specific structure of, your referencing style that you are doing at your university. But it'll be something like surname, comma, initial, full stop, date, the title in italics, the city of publication, the publisher itself, and then if this is like a newer edition, you'll say originally published and say when it originally came out, so 1995 or whatever. That is what you do. There are different specific ways of referencing different things. Like books are referenced differently to essay collections, which are referenced differently to journal essays, which are referenced differently to YouTube videos, which are referenced differently to a Netflix show. Everything has a different way of being referenced. There are too many. They are literally like PDFs that will have tens of pages with just examples. You cannot go through all of these. It would be pointless to have a video. If you're not sure how to reference the specific thing that you need to reference, Google it, because there are so many. But you do need to always state. There we go, that's my reference. Now here's the thing, another one. Because I have seen this. In the bibliography, people have put as their reference, my own knowledge, common sense, and the internet. None of which are references. Your own common sense does not matter. Also, it is not your own common sense when it is information from a book. So if it's information from a book, it is not your own thoughts, it is from a book. Common sense also doesn't apply when you're talking about academic subjects. You have to have learned it from somewhere. And you also can't say the internet. That would be like saying, well, where did you find this information? Books. You can't just say book, internet. You have to actually say where on the internet. Because imagine if you said, oh, I found this great recipe, it's on the internet. You'd say, okay, well, do you know where? The internet. Do I go on Google and type in the internet? Okay, I don't know which one you're talking about. So you see, you need to be specific. Where did this information come from? Little thing, don't use certain sites as references. Wikipedia is not a source because anybody can edit it, unless you're giving like a very broad thing, like say if you were saying I don't know, a broad overview of a very, very simple topic. You're not really explaining in depth. You're just having it as like an aside. We're discussing this thing, but as a little aside, you could also look up this and you could reference the Wikipedia, but you can't use it as an actual source. The same with things like Spark Notes. Do not use those. You need to actually use your own information. Those are not academic sources. At a higher level, they'll even tell you that certain sources aren't allowed at all, like magazine articles. They'll be like, no, well, that's not an academic source. It's not peer-reviewed. So you can't use it as an academic source. So that isn't great. So don't do that. Make sure the sources you are using are good sources. And yeah, Lastly, there's a little thing also with referencing, but this is specifically more so high school stuff. If you're doing, say, literature or something at a high school level, right, and you're given a piece of text, it also applies to university level. You need to actually say what you're talking about. Where are you talking about? Say it's a poem, right? If you are mentioning a specific word in the poem, I'm going to look at the word because as it was used in that poem. Tell me the line number. You can't just say, it's in the poem. Well, congratulations, the poem is 20 lines long. Which line is it? Line 12? Perfect. Thank you. Say where the information comes from. Always. And you put that in brackets and you'll just say, pages 8 to 9. Paragraphs 7 to 6. 7 to 6, 7 to 8. Simple. Say where the information came from, because no information came from your head. You cannot just create knowledge. Like, that isn't how it works. No one is granting knowledge unto your brain on its own. You do not have just common sense or your own knowledge. No, you do not. You read it in a book. You watched it in a video. You learned it from somewhere. Where did you learn it? That is what you need to say in your referencing. All right. And that is pretty much that. I hope that this was helpful to the few people who would actually check this out, and hopefully it helps you with writing in future. These things you can always just use them. I'm going to also put them in the description so that you can, if you wanted to just like say copy and paste them somewhere to make it easier for yourself, anything like that, that is great. Do it, go for it. It will be a good idea. And that is pretty much it. Yeah, if you enjoyed this, this isn't really for enjoyment, this is just for purely informative reasons, but I do a lot of other videos which are more entertaining. Some of them are academically oriented, some of them are not. So check those out. Alright, so that is pretty much the end. I hope that you have a great day, month, week, whatever ahead, and goodbye.